The day began like any other. The sun had just started its slow climb over the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the quiet streets of Eastfield, a sleepy suburban town. But as the clock struck noon, everything changed. The sky, once a serene blue, turned a deep, unsettling red. It wasn't a natural crimson, more like a warning, a signal of something far greater than anyone could comprehend. Jason Keller, a 12-year-old boy with tousled brown hair and an adventurous spirit, stood in his backyard staring up at the sky. His heart raced, not with fear but with curiosity. Something inside him told him this was no ordinary event. The wind picked up, howling with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. As panic swept through the town, people rushed inside their homes, locking doors and closing windows. But Jason remained rooted in place. His eyes were fixed on the sky, as if waiting for something to reveal itself. And soon, it did. From beyond the clouds, massive, triangular ships appeared, descending slowly, casting long shadows over the earth. They were nothing like the flying saucers from comic books or movies. These were silent, imposing structures, almost blending with the blood-red sky, their surfaces smooth and reflective, like obsidian mirrors. Jason's mom, Claire, called out to him from the house, her voice shaking with worry. "Jason, come inside now." But he didn't move. There was something pulling him toward the unknown, something he couldn't explain. Just as the largest ship hovered over the town's central park, a low hum vibrated through the air, sending ripples through the ground. Jason, still fixated on the ship, noticed something strange. His pocket watch, a family heirloom passed down through generations, began to glow faintly. "What?" he whispered to himself, holding the watch up to his face. It wasn't just glowing. It was pulsing in sync with the hum from the ship. The ships were no longer just visitors. They were waiting for something. The entire town felt the tension building, and the air seemed to thicken with an unspoken dread. Jason, however, felt calm, almost like he was part of whatever was happening. His mom called out again, this time more urgently, "Jason, please." But before he could respond, the largest ship emitted a beam of light, piercing the red sky. It touched the ground just a few feet in front of Jason. He should have been scared. Any other kid might have run, but something told him this was his moment. He walked toward the beam, his steps deliberate. In the light, a figure materialized. Not an alien or a monster, but a woman, or at least something that resembled one. She was tall, almost 7 feet, with metallic, shimmering skin and eyes that glowed like twin suns. She looked down at Jason, her expression unreadable. "You?" she said in a voice that echoed like it came from the depths of space itself. "Are the one." Jason blinked. The one for what? Her glowing eyes scanned him, as if searching for something deep within. "You carry the key. You carry the legacy." Jason's pulse quickened, and he clutched the glowing watch tighter. "What do you mean?" The woman knelt, bringing her face level with his. "Humanity is at a crossroads. You are the messenger, our last hope." Jason swallowed hard. A messenger. Last hope. He was just a kid, not some hero from a sci-fi movie. But as he looked into her radiant eyes, he felt an undeniable connection, like he had known her all his life. Suddenly, the watch's glow intensified, and a holographic map projected into the air. The woman stood, her gaze fixed on the map. "They will come. And when they do, you must be ready." "Who will come?" Jason asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "The ones who seek to destroy. They are coming for Earth, and you, Jason, are the only one who can stop them." Jason's heart pounded in his chest as the woman's words sank in. He glanced down at the glowing watch in his hand, now projecting the strange map. It showed a series of star systems, each one connected by glowing lines, and at the center was Earth. A red pulse moved along the lines, edging closer and closer to Earth's location. "Who are you?" Jason asked, his voice shaking slightly, but his eyes never leaving the map. The woman straightened up, her gaze softening. "My name is Saya. I come from a race known as the Eldrians. We were once guardians of the universe, protectors of balance. But that was long ago." Jason frowned, his grip tightening on the watch. "Guardians? Why aren't you protecting Earth now?" Saya's eyes dimmed slightly, a hint of sadness in them. "We were betrayed, scattered across the stars by those who sought chaos. Your ancestors helped us once, gave us sanctuary here, hidden from our enemies. In return, we left behind knowledge, artifacts, and a warning, one that you now carry." Jason blinked, feeling the weight of her words. "My family." Saya nodded. "Yes, your bloodline has always been connected to the Eldrians. The watch you hold isn't just a timepiece. It's a key to unlocking the power you will need to face what's coming." Jason stared at the watch again, feeling its warmth pulse through his hand. He wanted to believe it was all a dream, that any second now he would wake up in his bed, but deep down he knew it was real. Too real. "What do I need to do?" he asked, standing a little taller, his resolve hardening. Saya smiled, a glimmer of hope in her glowing eyes. "There is an ancient weapon, a device capable of turning the tide of this war. It has been hidden on Earth, waiting for the right moment, and the right person to find it." Jason's mind spun with questions. Where is it? How do I find it? The map hovering in front of him shifted, zooming in on a remote location deep in the mountains of South America. The coordinates flashed briefly before disappearing. "You will have to travel there," Saya said. "But you won't be alone. There are others like you, descendants of those who once helped us. Together, you can find the weapon and unlock its power." Jason took a deep breath. "Others?" Before Saya could answer, a low rumble echoed through the air. Jason's eyes darted upward as the sky split open, revealing more ships, sleeker, more menacing than the triangular ones that had first appeared. These were different. "They found us," Saya said, her voice tense. "The Scourge." A chill ran down Jason's spine at the mention of their name. The ships began to circle above, casting a shadow over the town. They moved with deadly precision, unlike the lumbering presence of the Eldrian ships. The air hummed with energy, and Jason could feel the shift. This was the enemy Saya had warned him about. "What do we do?" Jason asked, his voice now edged with urgency. Saya glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You must go. Now. Find the others. They will guide you." "But what about you?" Jason protested. Saya's form flickered, the lights surrounding her dimming. "I can hold them off for a time, but you are the key, Jason. You must be ready. The fate of Earth rests on you." Jason's mind raced. The fate of Earth. He was just a kid. How could he possibly be expected to take on an alien invasion? But as he looked into Saya's eyes, he knew there was no turning back. He had to go. Without another word, Saya raised her hand, and Jason felt a sudden jolt as a burst of energy surrounded him. The world around him blurred, and before he knew it, he was standing in the middle of his room. His heart raced as he struggled to catch his breath. His watch was still glowing, and the map flickered briefly before fading into his wrist. "Jason." His mother's voice echoed from downstairs, filled with fear. She had no idea what had just happened. He ran downstairs to find her by the window, staring at the ominous red sky and the alien ships hovering over the town. "Mom, we have to go," Jason said, grabbing her arm. "What? Go where?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jason hesitated. He couldn't tell her everything. Not yet. Someplace safe. "Trust me, please." Claire looked at her son, her face full of confusion, but something in Jason's eyes told her to trust him. She nodded, grabbing her coat. "Okay, let's go." As they rushed out of the house and into the car, Jason couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping up his spine. The Scourge had found them, and he was their target. time was running out. He glanced at the watch on his wrist one more time, feeling its steady pulse. Saya's words echoed in his mind. Find the others. The car sped down the highway, the sky above still burning an unsettling red as Jason sat in the passenger seat, his mind racing. His mom, Claire, gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The streets were empty. Everyone had already locked themselves inside their homes, terrified of what might come next. Jason, where are we going? Claire finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if afraid of the answer. Jason swallowed hard. He didn't know how to explain everything to her. Not yet. We need to get to the airport, he said, glancing down at the watch on his wrist. There's something I need to find. Claire shot him a sideways look, her eyes filled with confusion. The airport. Jason, you're not making any sense. What's happening? Why are those things here? Jason opened his mouth to speak but hesitated. How could he tell her that he was supposed to save the planet? That the glowing watch on his wrist was part of some ancient alien legacy? It all sounded crazy, even to him. But there was no time for doubts. I can't explain everything right now, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside him. But we need to leave Eastfield. It's not safe anymore. Claire's brow furrowed, but she didn't argue. The red sky and the alien ships above were evidence enough that something terrible was unfolding. She pressed down on the gas pedal, the car picking up speed as they raced toward the interstate. Jason leaned back in his seat, his thoughts drifting back to Saya and her cryptic message. Find the others. Who were they? And how was he supposed to find them in time? The map had shown him a remote location deep in the South American mountains, but he didn't even know where to begin. All he had was this watch, and the feeling that everything was about to get much worse. As they neared the city, the sight of military helicopters filled the sky. Jason could see flashes of light in the distance. Explosions, maybe, or something far worse. The scourge had arrived, and they weren't wasting any time. The car screeched to a halt at a military roadblock. Soldiers with grim faces waved them down, motioning for them to pull over. Claire slowed the car and rolled down the window, her eyes wide with fear. Turn around, ma'am, one of the soldiers said firmly. The city is under lockdown. No one's allowed to pass. But we need to get through. Claire protested. My son. Jason interrupted her, leaning forward. Please, it's important. We need to get to the airport. The soldier's expression softened slightly as he looked at Jason, but he shook his head. I'm sorry, kid. It's not safe out there. We're evacuating civilians. Head back home and stay inside. Jason's heart sank. He couldn't go back, not when everything depended on him leaving. But just as the soldier turned away, the watch on Jason's wrist flickered, casting a faint light into the car. The soldier paused, his eyes widening as he caught sight of it. You, where did you get that? The soldier asked, his voice suddenly tense. Jason glanced down at the watch, surprised by the reaction. It's been in my family for years. Why? The soldier's expression changed, a mix of recognition and fear crossing his face. You need to come with me. Now. Claire looked at Jason, confused, but Jason nodded slowly. They had no other choice. The soldier signaled for another officer, and soon Jason and his mother were escorted through the barricade. As they drove down the nearly deserted streets, Jason couldn't help but feel like something was shifting, like the world was watching him, waiting for his next move. They were taken to a hidden military base just outside the city, nestled deep within the woods. As they pulled up to the facility, Jason noticed something odd. A series of symbols etched into the walls of the base, symbols that matched the ones on his watch. Before he could ask what they meant, the doors of the base slid open, and a man in a black military uniform stepped out. He was tall, with a sharp, calculating gaze that seemed to pierce right through Jason. Welcome, the man said, his voice cold but respectful. "I'm Colonel Hartley. You must be Jason Keller." Jason blinked in surprise. "How do you know my name?" Colonel Hartley's eyes flicked to the watch on Jason's wrist. "Because we've been waiting for you." A cold chill ran down Jason's spine. Waiting for him? How long had they known? And why hadn't anyone told him sooner? Hartley motioned for them to follow him inside. As they walked through the base, Jason couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Soldiers and scientists moved about, all focused on their work, but every now and then someone would glance at him, their eyes lingering on the watch. They were led to a small room where a large screen displayed the same map Jason had seen earlier. Earth, surrounded by star systems, with a red pulse moving steadily toward their planet. "We've been tracking the Scourge for years," Colonel Hartley said, his voice grim. "We knew they were coming, but we didn't know when. That is, until you activated the watch." Jason stared at the map, his stomach twisting into knots. "Why me? I'm just a kid. I don't know anything about stopping an invasion." Hartley crossed his arms. "You may be young, but you're not ordinary. That watch, it's part of a network of ancient technology left behind by the Eldrians, meant to awaken in a time of great need. You are the key, Jason. The Scourge are coming for Earth, and you're the only one who can stop them." Jason's mind reeled. He had known something was different about the watch, but he hadn't expected this. "How do I stop them?" Hartley's gaze was steely. "First, you have to find the others." Jason's breath caught in his throat. "The others, just like Saya had said." Hartley continued, "There are others like you, descendants of those who helped the Eldrians long ago. Each of them has a piece of the puzzle, and together, you can unlock the weapon needed to stop the Scourge." Jason felt a surge of determination rise within him. It was starting to make sense now. The watch, the map, the warning. It was all connected. He wasn't alone in this fight. But before he could ask more questions, an alarm blared through the base. Red lights flashed, and a voice crackled over the intercom. "We have incoming. Scourge ships are approaching." Colonel Hartley's face hardened. It started. Jason's pulse quickened as the base went into lockdown. He knew what he had to do. The search for the others would have to begin. Now, the alarms echoed through the military base, a chilling reminder that the Scourge were closing in. Jason stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the world pressing down on him. His mind raced, replaying Colonel Hartley's words. He wasn't just any kid. He was the key to humanity's survival. Claire grabbed Jason's arm, her voice shaking. "Jason, we have to leave. This is too dangerous." But Jason shook his head. "We can't, Mom. This is why I'm here. We have to stop them, and I need to find the others." Colonel Hartley, his expression stern and unyielding, barked orders to the soldiers around him. "Get defenses up. We can't let them breach the perimeter." Jason turned to Hartley, his heart hammering in his chest. "How much time do we have?" Hartley glanced at the monitors, where red dots, Scourge ships, moved closer. "Minutes, at most." Jason's pulse quickened. He wasn't ready for this, but there was no time to hesitate. "What do I do?" Hartley stared at him for a moment, then nodded toward a small device on the table. "Take that. It's a tracker connected to the watch's signal. It'll guide you to the others. But you need to move fast. Once the Scourge land, they'll be looking for you." Jason picked up the device, a small circular piece of tech that hummed softly in his hand. It was sleek, with faint glowing symbols etched into its surface. He slipped it into his pocket, the weight of responsibility growing heavier by the second. Claire stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "I'm coming with you." Jason shook his head. "No, Mom. It's too dangerous. You need to stay here." "No," she interrupted, her voice firm. "You're my son. I'm not letting you face this alone." Jason hesitated, then nodded. There was no time to argue, and part of him was relieved to have her by his side. "All right, But we need to move. Hartley handed them a small device, a communication link. Stay in contact. If we can hold the base long enough, we'll try to assist you once you locate the others. With that, they hurried out of the control room, the sounds of sirens and shouting growing fainter as they made their way to the underground hangar. The corridors were narrow, dimly lit by emergency lights. Soldiers ran past them, preparing for the inevitable attack. Jason's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts, but one thing was clear. He needed to find the others before it was too late. He glanced at the watch on his wrist. The symbols glowed faintly, responding to the urgency of the moment. When they reached the hangar, a sleek, black military vehicle awaited them, its engine humming with quiet power. Hartley had arranged everything quickly. Jason climbed into the driver's seat, his mom taking the passenger seat beside him. "Do you even know how to drive this thing?" Claire asked, her voice tight with concern. Jason's hands tightened around the controls. "I'll figure it out." He hit the accelerator, and the vehicle shot forward, speeding out of the base through a hidden tunnel. As they emerged into the forest, Jason glanced at the tracker. It displayed a map with a glowing dot indicating the location of the first person they needed to find. "It's south," Jason said, steering the vehicle toward the open road. "We need to head to the mountains." The drive was tense, the sky above still an eerie red, casting long shadows across the landscape. Jason couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, hunted. The scourge ships were somewhere out there, and it was only a matter of time before they caught up. Hours passed, and the roads grew narrower as they ascended into the mountains. The air was colder here, the towering peaks looming over them like silent sentinels. Jason kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the others. The descendants like him. What would they be like? Did they even know what was happening? Suddenly, the tracker beeped loudly, snapping Jason out of his thoughts. "We're close," he said, slowing the vehicle. They came to a stop near a small remote cabin nestled in the woods. The tracker's signal was strong now, the glowing dot pulsing rapidly. Jason took a deep breath and stepped out of the vehicle, the cool mountain air biting at his skin. Claire followed him, her eyes scanning the area warily. "Are you sure this is the place?" Jason nodded, holding up the tracker. "It has to be." They approached the cabin cautiously, the wooden steps creaking under their feet. Jason knocked on the door, his heart racing. There was a moment of silence before the door creaked open, revealing a young girl about Jason's age. She had wild, curly black hair and dark eyes that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Her face was set in a hard, determined expression, but there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes when she saw the watch on Jason's wrist. "You're here," she said simply, stepping aside to let them in. Jason exchanged a glance with his mom before stepping into the cabin. Inside, it was sparsely furnished, with only a few pieces of old, worn furniture. The girl motioned for them to sit. "I'm Sophia," she said, sitting across from them. "I've been waiting for you." Jason blinked, surprised. "You knew I was coming." Sophia nodded, tapping a similar watch on her own wrist. "I've had this for as long as I can remember. My parents told me it would be important one day, that it would guide me to others like me. And now, here you are." Jason felt a sense of relief wash over him. He wasn't alone in this. "We're supposed to stop the scourge," he said, his voice steady. Sophia's eyes darkened. "I know. I've been preparing for this my whole life." Before they could say more, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Jason rushed to the window, his heart sinking as he saw dark shapes moving through the sky. Scourge ships, they had found them. "We have to go now," Jason said, grabbing the tracker. Sophia didn't hesitate. She stood and grabbed a small bag from the corner of the room. "Let's move." As they rushed out of the cabin, the sky above was filled with the hum of scourge ships, their sleek forms cutting through the air like predators closing in on their prey. Jason's pulse pounded in his ears as they sprinted toward the vehicle. They had one more person to find before they could make their stand. But the scourge was closing in, and time was running out. The rumble of the scourge ships echoed ominously through the air as Jason, Claire, and Sophia sped away from the cabin in their military vehicle. The mountains loomed larger, casting deep shadows across the winding road. Jason gripped the wheel tightly, his heart pounding in his chest. The urgency of the moment left no room for mistakes. "How far is the next one?" Claire asked, her voice strained as she glanced nervously out the window at the dark shapes moving through the sky. Jason checked the tracker again. The glowing dot on the map indicated their next destination was deeper into the mountains, near a location marked as the Hidden Fortress. "Not far," he said, accelerating. "We're almost there." Sophia, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. "The Hidden Fortress is real. I thought it was just a legend." Jason glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "What do you know about it?" Sophia shrugged. "My parents used to tell me stories about a place hidden deep in the mountains, a sanctuary built by humanity centuries ago in case of a cataclysm. It was meant to be a last defense, but no one knew if it actually existed." Jason's mind raced. If the fortress was real, it could be their last hope of survival. But they had to reach it before the scourge did. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. Jason swerved to avoid a massive crack forming in the road as the earth shook violently. From behind, the scourge ships descended, their engines roaring with an alien hum. Beams of red light shot out from their hulls, carving deep gouges into the forested landscape. "We have to move faster," Claire shouted, her voice filled with panic. Jason gritted his teeth and slammed his foot on the accelerator, the vehicle hurtling forward at breakneck speed. The scourge ships were relentless, their pursuit unwavering. It wouldn't be long before they caught up. As they sped around a bend in the road, Jason spotted something ahead. A large metal gate set into the side of the mountain, half hidden by overgrown vines and rocks. The tracker beeped loudly, confirming they had reached their destination. "There!" Jason yelled, pointing toward the gate. "That has to be the entrance." The vehicle skidded to a stop in front of the gate. Jason jumped out, Sophia and Claire close behind. The gate was massive, its surface weathered but still imposing, with strange symbols etched into the metal, symbols that looked eerily similar to the ones on Jason's watch. He approached cautiously, holding the watch up to the gate. The symbols on the gate began to glow faintly, responding to the presence of the watch. There was a loud grinding noise, and slowly the gate began to creak open, revealing a dark tunnel leading into the mountain. "We need to get inside, now," Sophia urged, her eyes darting nervously toward the sky as the scourge ships closed in. Jason nodded, and they hurried into the tunnel. The gate groaned shut behind them, just as a blast of red energy from one of the ships hit the mountain, sending a shower of rocks and debris crashing down around them. Inside the tunnel, the air was cool and damp, and the only light came from the faint glow of the symbols on the walls. The tunnel seemed to stretch on forever, winding deeper into the mountain. Jason led the way, clutching the tracker tightly in his hand. They had to find the last person, and fast. After what felt like hours of walking, they emerged into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling arched high above them, with intricate carvings and designs covering every surface. In the center of the room stood a large, circular platform, surrounded by strange machinery and glowing crystals. It was unlike anything Jason had ever seen. "This is incredible," Claire whispered, her eyes wide as she took in the sight. Sophia approached the platform cautiously. "This is it. This is the Hidden Fortress." Jason stepped forward, holding up the tracker. The glowing dot on the map was right in front of them now. "The last person we need to find is here." As if on cue, a soft whirring sound echoed through the chamber, and a figure stepped out from behind one of the large machines. He was tall, with pale skin and short black hair, his sharp features giving him an air of quiet intensity. He looked no older than Jason, but there was something about him that seemed much older, like he carried the weight of centuries on his shoulders. "I've been waiting for you," the boy said, his voice calm and steady. "My name is Elias." Jason stared at him, a mix of relief and confusion washing over him. "You're the last one." Elias nodded. "Yes, and now that you're all here, we can begin." Sophia crossed her arms, eyeing Elias skeptically. "Begin what, exactly?" "The Scourge are already here. We need to figure out how to stop them." Elias stepped forward, his eyes glowing faintly. "The hidden fortress was designed for this moment. It holds the power we need to repel the Scourge, but only if we activate it together." Jason felt the weight of his watch on his wrist, its glow intensifying. He glanced at Sophia, who had a similar watch, and then at Elias. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. "How do we activate it?" Jason asked. Elias gestured to the platform in the center of the room. "We need to link the watches to the central core. It will channel the energy we hold as descendants and amplify it, creating a shield that will protect Earth." Jason's mind raced. It sounded impossible, but after everything he had seen, he knew this was their only chance. Without hesitation, he stepped up to the platform, Sophia and Elias joining him. Together, they held out their watches toward the central core. The moment the watches connected, a blinding light filled the chamber. Jason felt a surge of energy course through him, like he was connected to something far greater than himself. The platform began to hum with power, the glowing crystals around them pulsing in rhythm with their heartbeats. Jason could feel the weight of the Scourge's presence outside the fortress, but the fear that had gripped him before was gone. In its place was a sense of purpose, a knowledge that they were about to do something that would change the fate of the world. As the energy reached its peak, a massive, shimmering shield erupted from the platform, spreading out in all directions. It pushed through the mountain, through the ground, and into the sky, enveloping the Earth in a protective barrier. Outside, the Scourge ships were thrown back, their weapons useless against the shield's power. The invasion had been halted. For now. Jason opened his eyes, breathing heavily. He glanced at Sophia and Elias, who looked just as exhausted but relieved. "We did it," Sophia whispered, a smile breaking across her face. Elias nodded, his expression serious. "This is only the beginning. The Scourge will return. But now, we're ready." Jason stared at the glowing core in the center of the platform. They had saved the Earth today, but the real battle was still to come. The hidden fortress hummed with a quiet energy, its ancient machinery still glowing faintly after the activation of the shield. Jason, Sophia, Elias, and Claire stood at the edge of the platform, catching their breath. Outside, the Scourge ships hovered in the distance, unable to penetrate the protective barrier that now enveloped the Earth. For the first time in what felt like days, there was a moment of calm. Jason wiped sweat from his brow and glanced over at Elias. "How long will the shield hold?" Elias crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "It's difficult to say. The shield is powerful, but it wasn't designed to last forever. The Scourge will adapt. They always do." Claire stepped forward, her voice laced with worry. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to break through. There has to be a way to fight back." Sophia nodded in agreement. "She's right. We bought ourselves time, but we need a plan." Jason felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. For so long, he had been just a regular kid, but now he was part of something much larger than himself. The fate of the world rested in their hands, and the clock was ticking. He turned to Elias. "There has to be something more we can do. The fortress, the watches, they weren't just meant to protect us. They were built for a reason." Elias looked at Jason, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You're right. The watches were designed to awaken a power within us, a power tied to our ancestors and the ancient knowledge they left behind. But that power is only half of the equation." Jason raised an eyebrow. "What's the other half?" Elias gestured toward the walls of the chamber, where intricate carvings and symbols lined every surface. "These aren't just decorations. They're instructions. The ones who built this fortress knew that the scourge would come one day. They left us the tools to defeat them, but we have to decipher the meaning behind these symbols. Sophia walked closer to one of the walls, studying the carvings carefully. These look familiar. Some of these symbols are similar to the ones on our watches. Jason's watch began to glow faintly again, as if resonating with the symbols on the wall. He stepped closer, running his fingers along the grooves. The moment his hand touched the wall, a section of the carvings lit up, revealing the hidden passageway. Claire's eyes widened. "What is that?" Elias stepped forward, his expression serious. "It's the heart of the fortress, the true source of its power." Jason exchanged a glance with Sophia before nodding. "Let's go." Without hesitation, they made their way through the hidden passage. The air grew colder, and the dim light from the glowing walls cast eerie shadows as they descended deeper into the mountain. After what felt like hours of walking, they emerged into a vast, underground cavern. In the center of the cavern stood a large crystalline structure, pulsing with a soft, rhythmic light. Elias stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the crystal. "This is it, the core of the fortress. It's been dormant for centuries, but with our energy, we can awaken it fully." Jason could feel the energy in the room, a low hum vibrating through the air. His watch glowed brighter as they approached the core. "What happens when we wake it up?" Elias turned to face them. "If we awaken the core, it will grant us access to the full potential of the power left behind by our ancestors. It could give us the strength we need to not only defend Earth, but to strike back against the scourge." Sophia crossed her arms. "But what's the catch?" "There's always a catch." Elias nodded slowly. "The process could be dangerous. Awaken the core, and the scourge will sense it. They will know we have access to a power that could destroy them. They will come at us with everything they have." Jason felt a knot tighten in his stomach. It was a huge risk. The scourge had already proven themselves to be relentless, and if they sensed that Earth was about to fight back, there was no telling what they would do. But they couldn't sit around and wait for the shield to fail. They had to act. Jason stepped forward, standing in front of the crystal. "We don't have a choice. If we don't use this power, the scourge will destroy us anyway. At least this way, we have a chance to fight back." Claire placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, her face filled with both pride and concern. "Jason, are you sure?" Jason nodded, his eyes locked on the core. "We have to do this." Elias stepped up beside him, placing his hand on the crystal. "Then we do it together." Sophia joined them, her hand resting on the opposite side of the crystal. One by one, their watches began to glow brighter, their light merging with the energy of the core. The cavern trembled as the crystal pulsed, its light growing more intense with each passing second. Jason could feel the power surging through him, a force unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if the memories of his ancestors were flowing into him, filling him with knowledge and strength. The core's light grew brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. The ground shook violently, and Jason could hear the distant roar of the scourge ships outside, their engines screaming in protest as they sensed the awakening of the core. And then, with a final, deafening pulse, the core came to life. The light exploded outward, shooting up through the mountain and into the sky. Jason could feel the power coursing through the earth, spreading out across the planet. The scourge ships, once menacing and unrelenting, faltered in the face of the overwhelming energy. Elias let out a breath, his eyes glowing faintly. "It's done. The core is active." Jason stared at the glowing crystal, his heart still racing. They had awakened a power greater than anything he could have imagined. But as the light faded, a sense of foreboding settled over him. Sophia looked at the others, her expression grim. "They know." Jason nodded. "Yeah, and they're coming." The sky above Eastfield roared with the sound of the Scourge's massive fleet descending upon Earth. Their ships, dark and foreboding, loomed over the landscape, blocking out the sun and casting long, ominous shadows across the ground. The core's energy had done more than just awaken the fortress' full potential. It had become a beacon, drawing the scourge to earth in overwhelming numbers. Jason, Sophia, Elias, and Claire stood at the edge of the fortress, looking out over the horizon. The protective shield still shimmered faintly around the planet, but it wouldn't last much longer. They knew that once the scourge unleashed their full might, the shield would crumble, and all of Earth would be at their mercy. "We've bought ourselves time," Elias said, his voice steady but laced with tension. "But we can't just wait for them to break through." Jason clenched his fists, the weight of his responsibility pressing down on him. The power of the core surged through his body, giving him strength beyond anything he had ever known. But even with this newfound power, the odds were overwhelming. "There has to be something more," Jason muttered, his eyes scanning the sky. "The core, the watches, it can't just be about defense. There has to be a way to stop them for good." Sophia stepped forward, her eyes locked on the approaching fleet. "There is. The core holds enough energy to do more than just power the shield. It can be weaponized. We can use it to launch a counterattack." Elias frowned. "But it's risky. The core is unstable. If we tap into that much energy, we could destroy the scourge, but we could also destroy ourselves." Jason turned to look at Sophia, his heart pounding. "How do we do it?" Sophia met his gaze, her expression fierce. "We direct the core's energy toward their fleet. It'll take everything we have. But if we concentrate the power, we might be able to wipe out their entire armada in one blow." Claire stepped forward, her voice filled with concern. "And what happens to you? To all of us?" Sophia glanced down at her watch, the glowing symbols reflecting in her eyes. "We don't know, but if we don't try, Earth won't survive this." Jason felt a knot form in his stomach. The thought of losing everything, his family, his friends, his home, was almost too much to bear. But he knew Sophia was right. They had to act, no matter the risk. Elias placed a hand on Jason's shoulder. "It's your call, Jason. You're the one the core responds to. You have to make the decision." Jason looked out at the scourge ships, his mind racing. For a brief moment, he wished he could go back to being just a normal kid, without the weight of the world on his shoulders. But that wasn't an option anymore. He had been chosen for a reason. He took a deep breath and nodded. "We do it. We use the core's energy to take them out." Sophia nodded in agreement, determination etched on her face. "Then let's make it count." They moved quickly, returning to the chamber where the core pulsed with raw, untapped power. The air around it crackled with energy, and as they approached, their watches began to glow brighter in response. Jason placed his hand on the crystal, feeling the surge of power flow through him. Sophia, Elias, and Claire followed suit, their hands joining his as they formed a circle around the core. The ground trembled beneath them as the core responded to their combined presence. The energy intensified, the glow of the crystal growing brighter and brighter until it was almost blinding. Jason could feel the power building, like a storm ready to be unleashed. "Focus," Elias said, his voice strained. "We have to direct the energy toward the Scourge fleet. If we lose control, it's over." Jason closed his eyes, concentrating on the ships hovering above the planet. He could feel their presence, dark and cold, pressing down on him like a suffocating weight. But he could also feel the power of the core, a blazing light pushing back against the darkness. "Now!" Sophia shouted. In unison, they channeled the energy of the core, directing it upward toward the sky. A massive beam of light shot from the crystal, piercing through the fortress and out into space. The beam struck the heart of the Scourge fleet with devastating force, tearing through their ships like paper. The sky erupted in a blinding explosion of light and energy. Jason could feel the immense power of the core coursing through him. And for a moment, he thought he might lose control. The energy was too much, too intense. It threatened to consume him, to burn him out completely. But then, as quickly as it had begun, The light faded. The ground stopped shaking, and the beam of energy disappeared into the ether. Jason opened his eyes, gasping for breath. The core still glowed faintly, but its energy had been depleted. He looked around, seeing Sophia, Elias, and Claire standing beside him, all of them exhausted but alive. Sophia looked up at the sky, her expression filled with awe. "We did it." Jason followed her gaze. The scourged ships were gone, obliterated by the core's energy. The sky was clear again, the threat to Earth vanquished. But as they stood there, catching their breath, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "It's over," Elias said, his voice filled with relief. Jason shook his head. "No, it's not." Before anyone could respond, the ground rumbled beneath their feet. The fortress walls began to crack, and the core, once dim, started to pulse again, this time with a dark, ominous light. Sophia's eyes widened in realization. The core. We destabilized it. Jason's heart raced. The core was no longer under their control. The energy they had unleashed had thrown the delicate balance of the ancient technology into chaos. And now, the core was on the verge of a catastrophic meltdown. "We have to shut it down," Elias shouted, running toward the control panel. But it was too late. The core's energy was spiraling out of control, and there was no way to stop it. Jason looked at Sophia, panic rising in his chest. "What do we do?" Sophia's face was pale, but her eyes were resolute. "We get out of here. Now." The group sprinted toward the exit, the ground shaking violently beneath their feet. The walls of the fortress were crumbling around them, debris falling from the ceiling as they raced to escape. Outside, the once quiet landscape had erupted into chaos as the core's energy pulsed wildly, threatening to tear the fortress and the planet apart. Just as they reached the entrance, a massive explosion rocked the ground, and Jason was thrown to the ground by the force of the blast. He looked back, seeing the fortress collapsing in on itself, consumed by the unstable energy of the core. Claire rushed to his side, pulling him to his feet. "Jason, we have to go." Jason stumbled to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. They had destroyed the scourge, but in doing so, they had unleashed a new threat, one that could destroy everything. As they fled the collapsing fortress, Jason couldn't help but wonder if they had truly saved the Earth, or if they had only delayed its destruction. The ground beneath them rumbled one final time before falling silent. The fortress was gone, reduced to rubble. The core's energy had finally dissipated, leaving only a quiet, desolate landscape behind. Jason stood there, breathing heavily, his mind racing. The scourge was defeated. Earth was safe. But at what cost? Sophia placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice quiet. "We did it, Jason. You saved the world." Jason nodded, but the weight of what they had unleashed still lingered in his mind. The core's power had been immense, too immense. And now, they were left to pick up the pieces of a world forever changed. For now, they had won. But Jason knew that the battle for Earth was far from over. The end was just the beginning.